Hi, Joe.
Dude, this is a big year. It's 92. This is the biggest. This might be the best year for extreme. This might be the best year for extreme music and really music in general.
Yeah, no, it's impossible. So this is part 1 of 875.
Yeah, we got sleeping bags ready. We got meth going. We're ready to go as long as we can. It's
just nuts. The whole year's nuts. And I know we were talking, like, usually we're able to just kind of shoot the shit and get through it.
Yeah.
This, we got to be a little more.
It was tougher because this was like, there's almost as much stuff as other years, but the stuff we have to talk about is so good that it needs a little bit more time. And this, I looked up and I was doing the research. I was hanging out with Paul the other day on Wednesday. We were hanging out and I was like, this was actually, as I was doing my research, that's the strongest year for the music industry in the 90s. This was a massive year for music in general. The industry was peaking, underground, mainstream. There's tons of stuff. We did 91 with Dora. We talked about death metal, kind of a lot more on that. It was a death metal heavy episode. So I think death metal is really a good place to start off 92. So many great releases. I figured a great way to start would be I'm going to give my favorite of 92. Death metal, and I want you to give of just death metal, and I want to give yours. So we did that kind of in the chat. We were talking about in the group a little bit. A lot of people had opinions. A lot of people were throwing out some of their favorites. I'm going to go for 92. I think my favorite 92 record is going to be Acts of the Unspeakable by Autopsy. As I was going back and listening to a lot of these records, I listened to it the most. Still to this day, from when I was younger to now, I love it. Mental Funeral, like you talked about, in 91 is my favorite death metal record of all time. I think Autopsy kept it going. I think they finally got their just due recently in the last 10 years. I think that record rips. That's my favorite one. I'm going to go with for 92.
92 Autopsy. I would have to go with Malevolent Creation, Retribution. Just because I know I commented, to somebody, that's the one album that if somebody asks me what death metal is, I'll put that album on.
Because you think it's more like the thrash roots to the...
Yeah, I think it's just, when I think of death metal, I think of like Malevolent Creation, Retribution. I think of Deicide, self-titled, Obituary, Cause of Death. But to me, that's the one album, especially from this year, and there's a lot of great stuff. I mean, Amorphous, Sinister, Gorefest is probably my favorite Gorefest album.
False, I had that on there too. False is great.
It's, I think 90 through 93 are insane years.
I think False, especially for Gorefest, I mean, like Thomas Haywood, to us, we talked about covering Reality When You Die for a long time. I love False by Gorefest. I always did. I think it's maybe a bit more like when they started to really incorporate more song structures and be, kind of more, it's really catchy.
Yeah.
I don't want to say more mainstream, but it's definitely more classically structured. And it's funny you picked that Malevolent Creation record because I jammed a Retribution on. That's my favorite Malevolent Creation. I like it more than 10 Commandments.
Me too.
And I always kind of lumped Malevolent Creation more with like Demolition Hammer, right? Epidemic of Violence this year too, and Sadist also put out. I lumped that more into that kind of style with that kind of stuff. But I think like A Vision of Misery, by the way, Sadist, it's a great record. But I kind of always thought Malevolent Creation was more in line with that, a little bit more of a thrash background. Cannibal, obviously, gotta talk about Tomb of the Mutilated, started kind of with those thrash roots, but I feel like Tomb of the Mutilated is really when that's like their proper. It's their shining moment with Barnes. I like Butcher to Birth the most, but Tomb of the Mutilated for a lot of people is their best record. They kind of shed that thrashy background, and they're kind of just.
For me, it's
nuts.
Barnes, especially the first three. That's Cannibal Corpse to me.
Yeah,
I think they're still good. I think they got better as musicians as time went on, like exponentially better.
Yeah,
still putting out quality stuff. But for me, the first three are the greatest. It's hard to go through and write down a top 10. I know our buddy Randy, he messaged me and said, even if you put out a top 10, the shit that you forgot to put on your top 10 could still be a top 10.
100%.
It's like everything that you...
I'm saying Autopsy is my favorite, but in no way am I saying that it's better than these other records. I'm just saying that I throughout my, my course of listening to music, I go back to it probably more than I do a lot of other records. Second, I would probably pick Last One on Earth, also by Asphyx. I mean, I love Asphyx. Even for a time in my 20s when I was more into hardcore and punk, I still always listen to Asphyx a lot.
It's one of my favorite album covers of all time. It's
so
just
good.
So awesome.
Yes.
Vital Remains, Let Us Pray, you got Vader, The Ultimate Incantation. I mean...
Which, yeah, and it's funny, I don't even have them on my list, and that's great. I forgot about Ultimate Incantation, how could I? A lot of people picked Retrospective. I know you're not the biggest Incan fan, but Mortal Throne of Nazarene's forever my favorite. And then Diabolical Conquest is actually my third favorite incantation. Now, by no means am I saying it's not as good as those other ones. I'm just saying, again, they're all great. But Amor to Agatha is still such a classic. Everything about it, and I was listening to it a lot back for this, it's hard to go back and remember the vibe is so... Of all these bands we're going to talk about in death metal, they really had their own thing going on, which now is done a lot by a lot of different bands. But back then, they really were the ones that had that sound. That dirgy, dark, slow, ominous sound with Craig Pillard's vocals that were low, but low in a different register than a lot of these other bands. One thing is, going through that I want to say about death metal, too, is we get to, like, At the Gates, Red in the Sky is Ours. I jam that a lot, actually, for this.
I think they get unfairly kind of... Just because the Slaughter of the Soul was like, it's so monumental and influential.
You forget that they even had records like this,
People don't go back and listen to the other stuff, and I think it's all great.
It's moody, it's cool, but like Incan, all these bands have different sounds. They all have a different personality.
That's my complaint about death metal today, is that back then, everything, it was so dynamic. Malevolent Creation didn't sound like Demolition Hammer, who didn't sound like Bolt Thrower, who didn't sound like Cannibal, who didn't sound like Edge of Sanity, with Dan's clean vocals and
Do you like now? How do you feel about Unorthodox?
That's my favorite.
That's your favorite one?
Edge of Sanity album.
I know a lot of people feel that way too. Like that's their top.
I know a lot of people say Purgatory.
That's my favorite. Purgatory.
I'm the kind of guy that if you pick Unorthodox, Spectral, or Purgatory, I don't think either of those are wrong.
All of them kind of fit. Yeah.
But it's like even, Tiamat Clouds, it's like...
Nothing sounds like it,
It's nothing, and I think that's something that's missing from death metal today, is that when I listen to the shit today, it all sounds the same. It's all muddy, with like the same fucking just shitty, muddied vocals.
Almost like they're trying to capture something from this, but they don't really...
There's bands like Carnugia that's putting out old school shit.
And even they have their own personality going on. I think that's why it's super
and I think, our buddy Arn, he played me the new Shed the Skin with Matt Sork. Dude, it's great. It's like dudes that understand what old school death metal is, and they're just like doing, like, we just have fun, put out an album. Like, it's just fucking great.
Matt's savvy. Matt Sorg was one of the ones I want to bring up too, because it's dark, like Last One on Earth, like Slumber of Sullen Eyes by Demigod. They're all dark, but they all have their own personality with being dark. Like the Demigod sound, it was that Finnish sound. It was different. It was dark like Incam, but they didn't sound exactly alike. They had a similar aesthetic, but it wasn't the same. I think Descent into the Absurd by Fleshcrawl is like that too. Now I love Fleshcrawl After. This is actually my least favorite Fleshcrawl record. Is their debut. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for that.
Impurity or Blood?
Impurity is my favorite Fleshcrawl. That's one of my favorite death metal albums of the 90s, period. But I think I like Fleshcrawl when they started to try to sound like Dismember a lot. But I think I think they wrote better records. But I think, again, they had that dark kind of sound. Seance, Forever Laid to Rest, it's kind of American, like Grave You'll Never See. These Swedish bands a little bit more American style, I think, but they still had their own personality. Penetralia by Hypocrisy, the same way. It's more American, more sound kind of sounding. It wasn't
I would
Swedish.
definitely say Penetralia and Osculum they don't fall into that like Swedish death metal category.
No.
It sounds more like, you know, the U.S. style to me. But you're talking about shit getting dark and stuff like that. I mean, you have Paradise Lost with Shades of God, which is another great album.
Awesome.
But that to me was kind of their last album that gives you that early feel.
Yeah.
Because Icon is next, and that's what really started the clean vocals and
Departure.
You know.
It's kind of like Anathema Crestfallen, which came out in '92, which I was listening to a lot for this. And it's funny, I had my notes ready, I was listening to, and whenever I make these notes for this, I listen to a lot of the records. I found myself the last few days really listening to Anathema a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening back to it, you know, they never really did, they left this style really early.
I remember years ago when they started putting out, I know like when Judgment came out, which is my favorite Anathema, but it's also the last one that I'll ever listen to because everything after that is like shitty fucking
once the Art Garfunkel hair comes on.
Yeah, it's like Air Supply. Right. And it's disrespecting Air Supply.
It is like Air Supply.
Like this shit was so horrible. Those Anathema albums, but I remember reading an interview where one of the Kavanaughs, said that they honestly thought that the early stuff was garbage, and they were like, you know, and that to me is another reason why I won't listen to that newer shit, because it's like, man, that early stuff
is great.
Crestfallen, Serenades, Pentecost, like all that, even Silent Enigma, Eternity, Alternative.
You know what's so funny about that is like I was watching when they brought back the original singer Darren for a couple. This is like a few years ago. They brought him back live for a couple shows to do a guest spot, and when they play Sleepless and stuff like that, they nail it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's weird that they disavow it, but the second they start playing, it sounds like you're in a time capsule in '92 or '93 again. Like they must really think something of it that they can go right back to it.
And I know that newer shit, the later stuff, people on, you know, message board I'm on, they just went gaga over it. Thought it was incredible, and it just always sounded fucking pretentious and hipsterish to me, you know, because I'm like, you can't honestly think that this stuff is that great.
Yeah,
but I think with Paradise Lost, you know, Shades of God is one of my favorite albums from them. They also have a storied career of kind of like going off the rails and doing more of like a Depeche Mode sound, you know, especially with Host. But at least they had like a course correction and came all the way back.
You know, it's almost like a lot of bands kind of doing, a lot of time, this is also one of the years where you get a lot of bands kind of doing their last thing before they went to something else, like Unleash, Shadows in the Deep, which I love. Bloodbath, my favorite song they ever did. And Unleash kind of goes in a different direction towards the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
Amorphous, Acrylion, Smiths is their last, one of their, obviously we know what they would do after this, which I like, you know, Tales from Thousand Lakes, but a lot of people hated it, and then after Tales, I just, you know, I'd rather have a fist permanently shoved in my ass than listen to anything they did. But
I'll be honest with you, dude, up until recently, I've never heard anybody say that they hate Tales, you know, because
I always grew up thinking it was loved.
It was what?
I grew up thinking it was a loved record. Like everybody kind of dug it, and then after that, and as you get older, it's like people like really couldn't stand it.
I think it's because they have been so different for so long that maybe that fucks with like their perception of what that album.
Like it started here.
But like, give me a break. When that album came out, it still had the old logo. The cover's fucking incredible. The songs are there. It's
the Relapse thing. I remember the Relapse thing with the back, with the band photo. Like they just look cool. There was some Moog synthesizers and stuff on it, but it's like there's a lot of moody stuff going on. Like I think Edge of Sanity did moody stuff.
Yeah.
They hit, like Hypocrisy, for example, incorporated a lot of synths throughout their career.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not to hate on them for that. It's not really that fair. But I mean, a lot of other good stuff as far as like the thrash stuff goes in Malevolent Creation, like Massacre, Inhuman Condition. That's a classic record too, where it's a little bit thrashier. There's stuff that's all over the place for this year for death metal. It's great. I think, and again, another classic. I mean, you know, there's Tomb of the Mutilated by Cannibal is probably the biggest from '92, but I think Incomplete gets a lot of hate too.
It does. Yeah.
People really hate, and I love that. It's always been my favorite. I love that record. I love the flat production. I love the riffs. I think when they brought back Alan West, to me, he's the riff master general of Obituary. Those simple Celtic Frost riffs. James Murphy's great, but I think that Alan West, his riffing is Obituary. What I love about Obituary. I want my Obituary simple to the point. I think the Incomplete to me it's a rib dinner with mashed potatoes and carrots. That's what you get. It's great. You know, it doesn't have to be.
No, a lot of people hate it. I never really understood it. I know there's some albums that, like, to me, I think there's albums that kind of toe the line between death and thrash. Like, do I think that Demolition Hammer is a death metal album? It toes the line.
I think death metal fans can like it.
Yeah, it's like Beneath the Remains and stuff like that. And also, it's like Exhorter of the Law. I know some people, when I was like, what's your favorite? People, like, I saw people putting that down and I went, that's more of like a thrash, but that doesn't sound like death
Tapping
metal
the Veins, some people think is a death metal-ish type. I think Tapping the Veins is one of the best Sodom records they ever did.
That's probably the heaviest album they've ever done. So good. I mean, it's nuts. But yeah, I don't, that Exhorter album, and I'm just going to say it, okay? We're Pantera fans.
Yeah.
I listen to that album, I 100% can hear where Vulgar Display came from.
Yeah, and we'll get to Vulgar Display in a little bit. I also can separate
them. Which is same year, yeah. But I don't, at the same time, as much as I love The Law, it's like, it doesn't bother me that it's obvious that they
You've known me for a lot of years and you know my style of stuff I like. How many bands do I like, and Justin's going to laugh at this, how many bands do I like that start with the letters Dis?
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and rip on these bands for ripping off this. I like 5,000 bands that rip off Discharge. Blatantly rip them off. Rip off the logo, rip off the artwork, rip off the look, everything. I don't care. Yeah. It does, to me, they don't really, you can be influenced. I think Exhorter definitely influenced Pantera, but here's the thing, dude. It is different, and I think The Law is a weaker album than Slaughter and Vatican. I think it's still cool, but it is, to me, a little bit weaker.
The Law is my favorite.
I think a lot of people in the group were saying that they thought this Demo Hammer record is weaker than the first one, which I can kind of see, but I think they're both neck and neck. I don't really see that.
I think they're neck and neck.
I think they've always been neck and neck. I think Epidemic is just as heavy, just as vicious. I don't really see it as a pulling back the reins a little bit at all. I don't really think that some of these. I don't think that Cannibal Corpse doing Tomb was a pulling back the reins. I think Grave You'll Never Cease heavier than Into the Grave. I think it's a lot of these bands are kind of going somewhere a little heavier. Epidemic also, Decameron, that's a little bit on the thrashier kind of side too. That's a cool record that kind of gets overlooked for '92 also, which is great. A couple last ones I want to get into with death metal. I think Vital Remains, Let Us Pray gets a lot of love, rightfully so.
I don't think they put out a bad album until the last one. Was it Icons of Evil? I don't know. But I think Let Us Pray, Into Cold Darkness, those two are so
Forever
underrated.
Is still great too.
Dude, Dawn of the Apocalypse, Forever Underground. What do you think? I want to talk about Legion, Deicide. Okay?
Love it. Absolutely love it. Here's what I'll say about this. I said this in the group. I talk about this too a lot with Justin from Hells and Paul and other people. It's still, when I put it on, and Rob Lesniak from Limb Splitter, and I talk about this quite frequently. I still, whenever I put it on, I'm as blown away by it as when I was 15, because I don't understand what influenced it. And I've always been, I like the history of stuff, and when I like a band, I like to go back to what they were influenced by, what caused it. How they went from listening to Slayer or whatever they were listening to creating that, I don't know what they listened to, because it's mind-blowingly insane. And I get that it's not for everybody, but every time I put it on, my dick explodes. Because it's so, nothing is... And I think for a lot of bands in the 90s later on, like Deeds of Flesh, a lot of the Unique Leader bands, Paemia, a lot of those kind of, even like Origin, a lot of those technical death metal bands, that's really the beginning of a lot of that. It's so crazy. Steve Osheim is the most underrated death metal drummer of the 90s, period.
I think that, for me, I think it's a good album. I don't think that it even comes close to touching the self-titled.
It's not as catchy.
No, it's not.
The songs are not as well.
But I will say, it is so... When I listen to that album, I'm like worn out by the end of it.
It's insane.
Because it's you know, I mean, it's badass in that sense, but I've never been as big of a fan of that as the self-titled. And I'll be honest with you, I've never been a fan of the stuff really after. The newest one they put out, I thought was, you know, really good. But Legion, to me, is... I still lump it in with the first as classic Deicide.
Yeah.
It's got that dark album. It's everything about it just reminds me of the self-titled.
Yeah. And Grave Plague, when we were on, our tape was on Kako Daemon Records, which is like, you know, obviously influenced by the first track. But everything up until Serpents of the Light, including Serpents of the Light, I love. But I think that definitely Legion's an anomaly in the early catalog where it's not catchy, it's not stripped down, it's not as... I think after Legion they went back to writing catchier, hookier songs. Because I think that's really their bread and butter. I think they're best at doing that. I think even when you see them do Legion songs live now, it's like you can tell it's a different vibe. It's a different kind of. But I think as far as like, you know, catchy stuff and the mid page, I think Bolt Thrower, Fourth Crusade, Bolt Thrower was a band that really, you know, I think over time has become one of those bands that really stood the test of time and younger kids love and cling to a lot. Like an Obituary, like other bands like that. You know, it's more they kind of have that. It's more it's easier to get into a Bolt Thrower record than it is Legion or even maybe Incantation or something like that.
Bolt Thrower is one of those rare bands that I don't think ever put a bad album out ever. Fourth Crusade's my favorite.
Yeah, the Motorhead of death metal.
Yeah, so but I think that in terms of 92 being like for death metal, I think it's quite possibly the strongest year for death metal. I think pound for pound, every album that you can name when it comes to death metal is just absolutely perfect. So yeah, I mean it's nuts. When I was going through and I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick a top 10, and I listed them out and I started going through them. I'm just like, this might be a little more difficult because Baphomet, Dead Shall Inherit.
Awesome record.
There's another one that, you know, for the guys in the band look like they work on Buicks for a living. Either that or they fucking work at a pizza shop. It's like, I mean, they're just back in the day where that's the shit that I like. I love that sound. I love the vocals. The album covers were great. It was almost like horror movies in like music form with a lot of these.
Yeah. I mean, Cemetery and Evil Shade of Grey too was really had that dark thing too. But I think you know the
Next you got
Morpheus Descends, Ritual of
I think
Infinity, right?
Somebody's supposed to be I saw remastering or re-releasing that Next album.
Cenotaph, Gloomy Reflection of our awesome, dude. I mean but I think, you know, again, as a segue from death metal, I think, you know, there was, as death metal was kind of going up, you know, grind, again, big year for grindcore. My favorite record of 92, period, from, you know, there's no questions asked, Utopia Banished, it's my favorite Napalm Death record. I love it. A lot of people are surprised by that, being a grind, you know, crazy grind person. I love the early stuff. I love Mick Harris. His contribution doesn't need to be talked about. But I love Danny too, and I think that Utopia. See, I'm more of a Utopia fan than I am Harmony Corruption. Because to me, Harmony Corruption was too Morrisoundy. It was too
Scott Burns.
It was too death metal. The production was. I think with Utopia, they went back to the older roots and blended it with the death metal. And I think it's a perfect record. The World Keeps Turning EP.
I love both of those.
Also great.
Utopia is the first. No, that's not the first one, because the first one was actually my favorite, which is Fear, Emptiness, and Despair. So Utopia, And Harmony, I can't pick which one would be the second. They're
tied the mid artwork with Utopia Banished, everything about it.
They're tied
so
for me.
Great.
I think that both of those albums, those three, that run of those three albums is what defines Napalm Death for me. It's probably Blasphemy, but I don't really get into anything after.
It's all right. I mean, I'm one of the few people that loves their whole discography, but I also love the whole musical journey they do. But the greatest American grindcore record of all time came out this year too. We haven't talked about Brutal Truth a whole lot on this podcast. We will more in '97 because we'll get into that in a little bit. But Extreme Conditions, Demand Extreme Responses. I'll flat out say it, that is the best American grindcore record ever.
That's the only, even over Terrorizer.
Yeah, it's the best American grindcore record of all time.
I mean, that's the only one I own. I'll be completely honest with you. I may have heard the other ones. Don't remember.
There's a lot of death metal fans. This is the only one they have. It's the only one they like.
Because
Scott Lewis on drums is unmatched.
It just looks like a death metal album. It sounds like a death metal, even though it's grind. But it's the drumming is insane when he does those fucking like hyper blasts.
It's nuts.
And that to me is.
I love Richard. I love what they became, and we'll get more into this in '97 with Sounds of the Animal.
Is that that's not your favorite Brutal Truth though?
No, Need to Control. But I think that I like Richard on drums a lot, but it was more of a hardcore punk influence. For the straight, I understand why, especially death metal fans love Extreme Conditions, and it is the best American grindcore record of all time. It's balls to the wall insanity. A couple great EPs, like I mentioned. World Keeps Turning by Napalm Death, but also Tools of the Trade by Carcass. Love that material. Like, I like Necroticism a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Carcass, the Tools of the Trade EP is probably the last classic Carcass material you'll get before they get to Heartwork.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even Tools of the Trade. Some people Necroticism was too much of a departure, but again, like I've always said, as Carcass was departing, Pathologist, puts out one of the most classic gore grind records of all time. Putrefactive and Cadaverous Odes. Amazing. Impetigo, Horror of the Zombies, which is, an underground classic. Razorback Records pretty much started because of Impetigo.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Billy, good dude. But they had...
I was just talking about Billy last night with in Razorback. With the other episode, I did another episode last night of like albums that were some of our favorite albums of the past 20 albums we think are classics within like the past 20-25 years. And I said the newest Hooded Menace I would put as a classic album, and went all the way back and talked about buying the first one off of Razorback.
Yeah.
Fulfill the Curse. And so definite
shout out to even Napalm. I love Napalm Death, and I've always been a Napalm Death fan, but bands like Gothicles, Theatric Symbolism of Life, that's the definitive mincecore, bands were already starting to hate Napalm for what they were becoming. Too much metal, too much influence.
Yeah.
Gothicles is the classic stripped down, old school Napalm style, Psychotic Noise, Advanced Carnage. If you're a grind purist, those are the two bands you want to look at and be like, this is how...
You're definitely the...
It's also, it's almost like black metal, which we'll get to black metal soon.
Mm-hmm.
But grind always has had that thing along with black metal too. It's like there are people that really believe like, no, you shouldn't expand the music at all.
Mm-hmm.
It should be this way. They're purists with it.
I like both, doesn't listen to that stuff as much as you. I would say that you kind of have to, because there's really not much you can do within the parameters of grind.
It's like thrash, yeah.
All the songs are going to be a minute long. They're going to be, so it's like, right. I don't have a problem with Napalm Death, putting out like Harmony Corruption, and then to me,
writing songs.
It's probably blasphemy to say, but I think Utopia Banished. If somebody's like, "What's a great death metal album?" I'd say, "Oh, Utopia Banished." If somebody said, "What's a great grind album?" I'd say, "Oh, Utopia Banished." So I wouldn't I don't care about stuff like. They are the one band that. I think they're kind of like Motorhead, in which they were able to bring like the punk and the metal crowd together. Napalm Death can bring kind of the grind and then the other metal crowd.
Yeah, they've always done that really well. I think that's, Atrocity, has a great record in '92. I think.
What's the name of the album?
Again, what is this motherfucker called? Tudeskilskund?
I think it's like Todenshoot or whatever. Yeah, that's a great. Hallucinations is my favorite. But
anyway, Disrupted Smash Divisions. That's easy to pronounce and way better. I think there's and Painkiller, Buried Secrets, and Naked City. John Zorn doing that kind of stuff, and big thing in '92, which was like bringing in the jazz and stuff like that, which would eventually influence Savage Carnage and Exit 13, a lot of these other bands in the '90s. The whole grind scene was really like great. A lot of great records in '92, but I think it's for Carcass especially. It's their, no offense, it's really like their swan song of the style. Until they get to Heartwork and Swan Song.
Well, like we were saying, a lot of these bands, even with Massacre, after this, they kind of, Massacre, Demolition Hammer put out what Time Bomb was after.
Yeah.
Which I'm not into that. And
nobody ever talks about that.
No, and a lot of bands were doing this, especially not just this year, but you had like Forbidden. A lot of these bands were changing. Sepultura then put out Chaos AD in '93. Then you had all of these. This is kind of like, to me, the peak year, but it's also the last year for a lot of these bands to put out shit that was really classic death metal. Because
you're right.
Because as much as I think Crillian Isthmus is one of the most underrated death metal albums ever. Right. But when you listen to Tales from a Thousand Lakes, which I love,
you're like, this is different. The last. Yeah, you're like, this is the last one of the. Yeah.
It's got a lot more of that like folk kind of Finnish folk influence in it and stuff. So yeah, I mean
it's also I want to quickly before we segue, because I know we got a lot more to talk about, but I think like it's funny you mentioned Chaos AD, because this is also the year where Agnostic Front does One Voice and tours with Obituary and Cannibal. And then they, Sick of It All puts out Look Around. Biohazard has Urban Discipline, which Body Count comes out. There's hardcore records. Cro-Mags, Alpha Omega, which I love, by the way. Love it. Honestly, I love, I love early Cro-Mags to death.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's never going to be matched. Nothing, it's perfect for US hardcore.
To me, it's Best Wishes, Alpha Omega. That's Cro-Mags to me.
But Best Wishes and Alpha Omega are fucking great records, and if you say otherwise, you're lying. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're just amazing. But I think like that hardcore influence was gonna seep into metal in the next couple of years.
Dude, that's Sick of It All. Just Look Around is one of the most underrated. In those albums back then, they're hardcore albums, but there were so many dudes that were into thrash that that did that stuff. Let me talk about that Biohazard.
Talk about it. Yeah, that's why I brought it up. I mean, Urban Discipline is a big '92 record.
First of all, when I saw that the original, lineup got back together, I shouldn't say the original drummer, I guess, just died. He just passed away.
Yeah.
But so the classic OG lineup got back together. I had a 6-foot erection with a cheeseburger on the end of it. Okay.
That Evan Seinfeld put into Tara Patrick's ass, and then you had to.
I'm going to say this. I love Biohazard. I watched that show when they came back.
Yeah.
Fucking flawless, dude. I had hair stood up on my neck. I was just like, holy shit. The energy was there. It was just, I think it was at Irving Plaza. I think they played 2 nights back to back, sold out in New York City. And it just, that album, and most of the shit was off the first 3 albums.
Yeah.
But Urban Discipline to me that's one of those albums I bought as a kid. I was like 12 years old, and I had my parents take me to, the record store, Quonset Hut down in Canton. And I bought the CD, and I bought it because I can't remember if it must have been COC Blind, or I can't remember what albums, like the chronology, but I remember buying one album and reading in the thanks all of the other bands, and Biohazard was one of the bands.
Yeah.
And, this is way
Judgment
pre-internet. So I saw the cover. It had the fucking parental advisory on it. That's mine. I'm getting it. And I just, dude, it was like so it's weird when you put an album on and you're just like, this is everything I've ever wanted. Because it was like, it had punk in it, it had hardcore, but Bobby Handel, guitar player, it was like metal riffs. He was like the metal guy to me. And great guitar player.
Absolutely. Classically,
Danny Schuller's like one of the greatest, fucking most underrated drummers. Period. Not just hardcore drummers.
One of the first bands Bielo and I got into was Biohazard, and I had the Sean Hunter Boy Meets World haircut with the green long jacket and the Jan Sport with the Biohazard patch on it. You had to have it in the 90s, or else you really, on your dyno bike.
Yeah.
Or else it's like I just think about it. There's the classic 90s bands. I listened to it, and I had Dom and I were getting food the other day, and I put on Urban Discipline back, and he was like bopping and dancing to it.
Dude,
it's like it's very like it's bouncy, good.
It's one of those albums. Even the Bad Religion cover, but dude, Mistaken Identity. I can sit there. Hopefully they come around. Hoping that they come around here live, so that the three of us, you, Bielo, and I can go see them. And they play this shit. It's like word for word. I'm going to be singing it.
It's classic. I mean, I think of this. It was also not. I feel like Biohazard had a really weird influence on music where it's hard to do that and not be corny.
Mm-hmm.
And still to this day, man, you watch their videos of like Dynamo Fest and stuff like that, and it's like they're definitely of their time, of their era. And if you try to capture that again, it's almost like you're just a goof. They're just so
and they didn't
genuine
do that.
The way
The recent live shows when I saw them, when I watched those videos, they didn't act like that. They acted more of like an old school hardcore band.
Yeah.
And first of all, I don't know, like Evan doesn't. I mean, he's fucking covered in tattoos. Physically, the dude is just unreal.
Yeah.
And he's like in his 50s.
They're all in pretty decent shape.
They are. And
Billy still looks great.
Yeah, and they sounded. Evan's got one of the coolest voices ever. To me, Evan on that bass, the way that he sounds, was almost like a hardcore Gene Simmons because he had that deep.
When my friends years ago, my friends in the early 2000s got into a band called Cold World from Wilkes-Barre, PA, pretty good hardcore band. And one of the first, my friend Andy from Live It Down played Cold World for the first time to me. The first thing I said in the back, I remember to this day being the backseat of the car when he played Cold World the first time. I was like, "This sounds like Biohazard," and I thought it was cool. Because like, this sounds just like Biohazard. Like it's like those vocals. Like he did that singy kind of raspy voice. It was cool to do. Like, it was mixing like a rock with like a a crossover thing. But I think like good time for Biohazard too, because there's a lot of mainstream stuff that we got to get to in '92.
Well, that was, Urban Discipline was like
pretty mainstream record.
It was pretty big, and then the State of the World Address, I think, was arguably even bigger.
It was a bigger album, I think.
I mean, constant rotation on MTV.
Put them on Dynamo. They
run killer tours.
Huge tours. But I think we have. Again, I'm going to go first for mainstream stuff. My favorite mainstream record of '92, White Zombie, Accessorizo, Devil Music, Volume 2. I mean, come on, man. Thunder Kiss 65. I remember being, at this time I'm 7 years old, like I posted, like staying up late, scramble porn. That comes on. USA Up All Night. Like I remember porn. Like good old scramble porn. Like
to catch a titty for like a split second.
The little bit where it would free and you'd get like a little couple pumps. And like it would always be the guy in like a backwards hat, like you never get anything of the freeze frame would always be like a guy like pumping.
It looked like he was moving furniture.
I jerked off to like side boob and a guy's thigh for like
side
5
boob
years.
where like the chick's head is here and her tit is here and her fucking pussy's like down here because it's like all. But no, dude, that's the thing is the mainstream back then. Even the mainstream shit was untouchable to me. Even that was like, holy crap,
Dude,
because
Danzig, How the Gods Kill. I mean,
my favorite Danzig. Period.
Really? That's your favorite Danzig?
That's my favorite.
I don't know about that. Well, let's not get crazy.
No, that's my favorite.
Because Lucifuge is the right answer, but that's your favorite Danzig?
It's my favorite because to me it has it's like Lucifuge. So you had you have the self-titled, which I think is untouchable. I think it's flawless. And then Lucifuge took that and really catapult. I mean, the songwriting is better. It's stronger. Everything about it is just so much better to me. But How the Gods Kill took that and then made it creepier. You know, with songs like, you know, Sistina's and, I mean, How the Gods Killed
Dirty Black Summer.
Bodies, but anything, the solo in anything is, I'd like to do an episode where we do like our top maybe 10, 15 guitar solos of all time, something like that.
Right.
That is going to be in there because the guitar solo in that is just fucking godless. Starting that album out where it's like, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And then it just stops. You know, it's just like this plotting. It's creepy as fuck.
It's definitely I'll say this. I love How the Gods Kill because it's definitely, to me, the last classic Danzig record.
You don't think 4 is?
4, I like 4 a lot,
mm-hmm.
but it's still a little bit musically of a departure. I can tell why John was going to leave. I feel like the classic Danzig sound is the first 3. And I like How the Gods Kill because of that reason. To me, it's the last real John Christ driven record. I feel like John wasn't really the driving force on 4. I feel like he was just playing on it. And afterwards, he was like, you know what? Go do whatever the hell you want to do and make, you know, Blade soundtrack music.
Evil, yeah.
That's it. You know, I can... But whereas like Countdown to Extinction by Megadeth, I love that record. Mm-hmm. That's a close second. I like Countdown to Extinction as much as I like the Black Album. I think it's strong as a record.
So here's the thing. I remember
Skin on My Teeth. I mean,
when Countdown came out, that to me was obviously, for me, it was Megadeth's, you know, response there to the Black Album.
I always look at Megadeth records like that too. Do you? Where it's like, I always look at maybe that's unfair, but I always look at their records like, okay, they did Master of Puppets. Let's do, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really
they did Peace Sells and then
Will You Rust in Peace. Like you did Master of Puppets. You did the Black Album. Maybe that's not fair.
And then they did, like, you know, Justice, and then it was kind of like they were battling back and forth, and then they had Rust in Peace, and then out comes the Black Album. I think the same year, 90, or Black Album was what, 91?
91, yeah.
Because then you had the Black Album, which was there's no argument with the Black Album. Yeah, like the Black Album was much bigger than Countdown, but I think that Countdown,
Black Album's bigger than a lot of things.
Yeah.
That's not throwing shade on it.
No, it's not. And I think that Countdown, because of the song "Sweating Bullets," I think was shit on by a lot of people, at least when I was in high school.
I still think it's a great song.
Which
goofy vocals aside.
They didn't like his goofy, you know, lyric. But "Ashes in Your Mouth,"
dude,
could absolutely belong on "Rust in Peace" as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
"Captive Honor" is like, the songwriting just got great. It wasn't speed metal anymore to me. It was
still retained that. It still retained it though. Even with Skin on My Teeth, it's still it's like the solos were still there.
To me, it was like more of a Guitar Hero album. I don't know. It was stripped down, but everything, like you said, everything was still there.
Even up to Euthanasia, they were still doing great solos.
I think Euthanasia has some of the best written.
My favorite guitar solo that they ever for Megadeth is the title track, Euthanasia. That's my favorite guitar solo they ever had. But like a lot of great, you know, as far as mainstream stuff, I would even say, like, if we're gonna go the Danzig route with how they were doing production wise, Rick Rubin in Trouble, Manic Frustration. It's probably one of my favorite Trouble records.
So, I mean, you know how big of a Trouble fanatic. Did I give you this shirt?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wore it in one of the early episodes.
Yeah, because I couldn't remember. I was like, I'm pretty sure.
You had a lot of compliments on that shirt, by the way.
Oh. Yeah. I got it on that Warlord clothing years ago.
I mean, I gutted the sleeves off, but it's
I mean, if I wore it now, I'd look like fucking sausage casing because my gut. Okay, so it's better on you with the fucking. But I love this album. But I'm gonna tell you something. I think it's bookended by better albums. I think the self-title's better, and I think that Plastic Green Head is better.
It doesn't sound a lot. It's, again, I like Manic Frustration because it's an anomaly in their catalog, but it sounds great.
It doesn't. It's more. not as
psychedelic.
heavy.
Psychedelic.
It's more psychedelic. I love it, dude. Like I love the album cover.
You know what though, Kip? Every time I put it on, I listen to it the whole way through. Every time.
Dude, Memories Garden is great. I mean, it's just
Hello Strawberry Skies. Everything about it's great.
It is. I just think that Plastic Green Head.
Wagner sounds great on it.
Kind of got a little heavier.
Yeah.
They went back to that.
Definitely.
Kind of more chunky riffs.
There's really no doom on Manic Frustration.
The self-titled, and the self-titled to me is the pinnacle. I told you when I was at that record store in Fort Worth, oh my God, Born Late Records, they had that huge self-titled like poster that was like a fucking dude, it was huge. And it was like $100 or $200, and I was just staring at it for and I'm thinking, if I walked out with this, I would be divorced in a fucking heartbeat. Not to mention, I don't even know how the fuck I would get it home because the thing was so big.
Katie would probably call me and
I'm like walking out a billboard. I'm like, all right, you guys are gonna have to fucking catch a cab.
I will say that the first Trouble song I ever heard was Tragedy Man, so that's probably why I love that. But how do you feel about Crimson Idol by Wasp and Revenge by Kiss?
Okay.
2 records.
So another one, you know that I'm a Wasp fanatic, and it pisses me off that he just canceled the tour. We were going to see him at the end of this month.
I had it on while you came in, by the way. Crimson Idol, yeah.
And this is what I think. I like the Crimson Idol. I think it's a great album, but I think it's not my favorite Wasp.
Well, no.
Although it's got one of my favorite Wasp songs of all time. They played live, and that's The Great Misconceptions of Me, which I think is one of the greatest songs ever written. I love the story of it. I love everything about it. It's just not my favorite,
Yeah.
My favorite is actually The Headless Children, which to me,
I think it's a better record too.
Musically, like just guitar playing is just fucking crazy. But this to me,
I like Crimson Idol though. I do like it.
This is I don't like it. I love it. There's no Chris Holmes, so it doesn't have that sleazy kind of Wasp.
It's feel. Not. It's bigger. It's bigger. It's almost.
So like the sleaze is gone with Chris, and this is just.
It's almost like their Use Your Illusion record.
It is, dude. No, that's a good comparison because it like the drums.
You know what I mean by that? It's almost like they kind of stopped. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they took the. You're saying like they took the sleaze out of it. Like they stripped it down. Like they made a mature record. I hate that word mature. I can't stand that word.
I know. I don't like that either. I don't like when people say that or they say
refined.
Although I say it or they say like there's no. I'm trying to think of the word. Like it's inspired.
Yeah.
Like what? They were clearly inspired enough to write it, like whoever the fuck you're talking, you know what I mean? I don't like that either. But I do use the word mature a lot. And only because, to me, it means that Blackie like sat down and said, I'm actually going to write. First of all, the concept I think is great. And Bob Kulick's on it.
Bob Kulick is on that record.
Frankie Banali.
But how do you feel about Revenge? Because we all know, I mean, one of my, love it. Gotta rep it tonight.
Yes.
It was one of my favorite Kiss albums. Again, one of the early ones I bought. It's mixed feelings about Revenge among Kiss fans. Some fans really love it. Some fans think it's kind of garbage.
I fucking love it, dude.
I love Revenge.
I love the way they look.
Again, one of the reasons why it's great, somebody was brought back into the fold.
Your girl.
That's right. gotta call on your favorite Aunt Vinny. Come back and do some riffs, right? Paul was in a pinch, wasn't he?
Look, man.
Paul was in a pinch, wasn't he?
Yeah, and and this is another album that I remember a while ago we were doing an episode probably on Kiss, and I was talking about how much I hated Bob Ezrin. But then you started naming off all the albums that fucker was on. I was like, oh, I guess I don't hate Bob Ezrin because he was on all these fucking amazing albums, like Welcome to My Nightmare. And then it's like, oh, Revenge. And I'm like, All right, maybe I don't hate the shit he's on, but this to me, I just think is fucking absolutely phenomenal.
It's a great Kiss record. It's the last great Kiss record.
I just wanna fuck.
Oh yeah.
I just wanna fuck.
So great.
And not only do I love this, I love Alive 3.
Alive 3 is great. I like some of the songs on Alive 3. I think are fantastically performed. I always liked Eric Singer's drumming live. I thought it was great. I thought Eric Singer also played really, really well on Revenge. But I think there's something about Revenge that's cool. It's the last record.
Domino's great.
Yeah. Anytime Gene's singing about banging underage girls, it's gonna be fantastic.
Dude,
I mean, that's
Unholy to me. You know how I feel about Gene, dude. Like, I think he's one of the most underrated vocalists ever.
It's the last great Demon song. Yeah.
He's obnoxious. You know, he's a fucking blowhard. But if you listen to his vocals,
awesome.
Dude, anything, even on like Creatures of the Night, I'm like, this guy's voice is awesome, dude.
It's great.
And Unholy, starting this album out with Unholy, you know,
Take It Off is a great song. So, I mean, Paul sings really well on this record. It's great, man. They really like. This is a cool Kiss record. It's you know, it's honestly, to me, it's the last great Kiss release. I think they ended on a fantastic. To me, this is the end of Kiss.
I'll say this. I think.
And I'm saying that as a Psycho Circus fan. I'm saying that as a 12-year-old kid that saw Psycho Circus, one of the first things I ever bought. Psycho Circus to me is a garbage record. It's not great. I love it for nostalgic reasons, but this is the last Kiss record, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't know how you feel about. Oh my God, Carnival of Souls.
I'd rather.
I love it.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't?
No.
I love it, but I never considered it.
If it were a Bruce Kulick solo record, I would think it was a great album. But as a Kiss record,
I love the album. You know why? Because if it wasn't Kiss, I might not like it as much. But I think it's a great album. But I will agree with you that to me, everything about Revenge is the very last.
Yeah,
like, that's it for Kiss.
I'm done after that. I don't need another Kiss record. No, I think they could have stopped with Revenge, done a couple reunions in the '90s, and they would have respect, which is something that band has never had. And I think the reason why they don't have it is because they keep doing a Broadway show.
Yeah, they're fucking
for white trash, where they like, but you know, and I think that's,
they're Brett Favre. Like, it's like, okay, I'm going to retire. I'm going to come back.
It's annoying.
It's like, no, just fucking stop. You'll be good.
Please,
you know, go out on a high note.
Trust me, they're going to buy the tampons and shirts and things. They're going to buy your shit whether you're here or not.
Dude, I'm going to say the classic Neil Young thing. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
And if it's the money you're interested in, dude, these trust me, as a Kiss fan, they will buy the condoms and the bubble gum. They'll buy anything you put your name on anyway. So it doesn't matter.
And this was a big year because Kiss was great. A lot of my favorite albums by other hard rock bands, Extreme 3, you know, 3 Sides to Every Story, is an absolutely phenomenal. I don't give a shit what anybody says about Extreme.
Extreme's great.
Nuno is absolutely underrated. That newest album called holy shit. Warrant Dog Eat Dog.
I was about to call it Dog Eat Dog. I had that on my list.
Where is it produced? Guess.
Was that here?
No. You're gonna shit your pants. If I'm thinking of the right thing, let's see. Never mind. I thought for some reason, Michael Wagner, there was an album that they did that I thought was produced at Morrisound. Yes, right here. Overdubs were recorded at Morrisound.
Well, good for them.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it was recorded at Scream Studios, but
I think at one point Cannibal Corpse was coming out of the studio and like Warrant came in and they probably hung out.
Walking in. But no, this album, dude, is... There's a slew of albums that came out from these bands where I think that this is the direction they should have kept going in, rather than trying to ride that like Seattle wave, change their sound. Because after this, they put out Ultraphobic, which I think is a really well-written album, but it's not
bad
good.
Timing.
This with Machine Gun, Hole in My Wall, Andy Warhol is right. Bonfire's fucking great. All My Bridges Are Burning. Dude, Quicksand. Janie Lane, who went to high school, Field High School.
That's right. Not far away.
Right down the road from
Severed
us.
Remains recorded our solos for a display of this file with the guitar from Cherry Pie, from the Cherry Pie video.
Are you serious?
Yep. So there we go.
Oh my God.
Up here in Parma, a block or two away, when we recorded the Severed Remains EP, Brandon Young, who we did the record with, Ben did his solos with the pink polka dot guitar.
Holy
the Cherry
shit.
Pie video, yeah. But I gotta know how you feel about a couple other of these mainstream records, because I know.
Well, let me real quick, because I was my point with Warrant was these out when that shit was like when the Seattle scene was getting big, and this is really kind of the last year that the Seattle stuff was bigger, but the hard rock stuff was still
going. That's what I was going to get to. Yeah, there's a crossover there. Yeah.
But after this, it's like no. But I think that with Three Sides to Every Story, you had Dog Eat Dog. A year later, you had Winger put out Pole. Believe it or not, you had Poison put out Native Tongue.
Native Tongue, yeah.
So these are some of the greatest albums, in my opinion. They're the greatest albums of those bands.
Keep the Faith by Bon Jovi.
So Keep the Faith has a song on it. First of all, it's a great album. I think.
How do you feel about Keep the Faith?
Okay, so I know a lot of people, they hate Bon Jovi.
Shout out to Mike Hammer, who's the biggest Bon Jovi fan in the world.
Are you serious?
I swear to God, yeah. He just likes Bon Jovi.
Are you fucking serious?
I'm not kidding around. He likes Bon Jovi a lot.
Well, he'll probably shit when he hit. New Jersey is my top 80s hard rock album ever. It's number one. So Keep the Faith is the next album. New Jersey was massive.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the Faith came out. They had like Bed of Roses, Keep the Faith. It's the last one that I like, and it has Dry County on it, which is like one of the best songs they ever wrote. But that's it. After this, they turned into fucking like mom rock, and it's just not any good. But
I can safely say that I think that Gorby on Necropsy's demo is better than anything Bon Jovi ever did. But
at the same time, you know, like you had Kiss Revenge. But I was also, you know, I posted Faith No More, Angel Dust.
I listened to that, and I will say this, I was with Biello. I had never really listened to Faith No More, a full album.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to the first 3 records after putting in Angel Dust, and I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. They're actually really, really cool. I think it's a really cool, like...
They're diverse.
At first I was like kind of thrown off, like this is kind of weird. I don't really know where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a couple of hits off that record that I remember like hearing, and I was like, all right, this is kind of good. And Mike Patton's voice is really cool. It works. The first record without him, I think is different.
Chuck.
Yeah, I think when he came into the fold, it's a little bit better. I think it works a little bit more. It was cool. I enjoyed it a lot. Meantime, also is 92 Helmet,
dude,
which is a fucking, I mean, big record for heavy music. Dirt by Alice in Chains.
So
is a metal record to me.
Meantime, to me, when I saw the video for Unsung, on MTV, it was like, at that time I was getting into so much metal.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, this was different, man, because it was like, yeah, this is heavy as fuck, but it's not metal. It's not pure metal.
It's not so aggressive, it's extreme.
Yeah, and every dude, Ironhead, Give It, I fucking worship this album.
Don't you kind of feel that same way about Dirt by Alice in Chains? So it's heavy, but it's not extreme. It's heavy, though. It's a very heavy record. I listened to Dirt a lot this past, couple weeks, and I was like, this is a heavy record.
It is.
It's a heavy rock record. It's just not extreme.
Like people to think about that. Like, I know a lot of the old guard and the death metal guys will be like, oh, fucking shit sucks. And it's just like, you know, when you're talking about mainstream stuff, to think that stuff like Dirt
was on the radio,
and fucking In Utero was like #1.
I have Incesticide. I know. I didn't want to.
Which is not this year.
It's not. It is this year, but it's not really an album. It's more of a collection. But it's like
no. Yeah. In Utero is not this year.
Incesticide is 92, and that's more of a collection. I want to briefly bring up. That's kind of like that's heavy. Dirty by Sonic Youth is. Can you imagine Drunken Butterfly is on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heavy song for the radio, you know?
Dude, that stuff was weird. Like, even Ministry, Psalm 69 was...
Are you a Sonic Youth fan, by the way?
A what?
Are you a Sonic Youth fan?
Yes and no. I think that...
Because Dirty's more of a stripped-down record for them, where it's...
Is that the one that has, like, the orange...
Little puppet thing? Yeah.
So, yes and no. Sometimes they're a little too artsy for me.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think
I like their artsy records, but even then,
the songs that are good, I think are just fucking awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason why, even if I don't like a lot of their shit, the reason why I totally respect them is because it was popular.
Yeah.
That weirdo shit is what people were listening to. Like, a lot of people I went to high school with, and it's like, so I didn't mind listening to like Dirt and you know, Meantime and stuff like that, and then some, you know, my friends would put on a Sonic Youth record, or and then that's, you know, even though White Zombie, that Lost Sexorcista was a metal album, I still lump it in with this because it was so big.
It's also really again, like Thundercat 65 radio heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's those are heavy songs.
The first time I heard that, it's like the catchiest.
ECW Wrestling was the first time I ever heard that.
Really?
Good. Yeah, I swear to God, that's...
But I mean, all of that stuff was like, I didn't just go into a store and just buy metal albums.
Yeah.
You know, I literally bought Vulgar Display of Power, and then I would have like an Angel or a Faith No More album, Rollins Band, The End of Silence, which I think is an absolute fucking...
I was about to ask you about End of Silence, because I know, like, Jay, our buddy who you do podcasts with, and he's part of the group. He's a big Rollins guy, and this is a great record.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's heavy too, and it's also like, it's a pretty heavy record. I think that's his best solo record.
I would agree, 100%.
Low Self Opinion. I mean, it opens with one of his best tracks.
Chris Haskett is everything. That lineup, especially Chris Haskett, to me is
almost real. That bluesy kind of, like, they go into that studio.
This is Rollins. Like,
jammy.
this sounds fucked up. This is Henry Rollins to me. I like Black Flag, but
yeah,
I like
Rollins.
I probably told you this before, but I like Keith Morris' Black Flag.
Yeah, I agree.
I like that a little more than Rollins. To me, it's like
I like Rollins solo more than I like him with Black Flag.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
it's like,
to me, the Rollins band was just this, and then the next one, which is Wait.
I think what Rollins was trying to do with Flag, with the Stooges influence and the blues and MC5, I think what he wanted to do musically, he did with Rollins band.
It was
Flag,
weird, dude.
I look at him with Black Flag more like I look with Ozzy with Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
The music was there. It's like, here's a box, you sing within the box.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing a good job. But I feel like this is more his Ozzy solo project.
Dude, if somebody was like, what is
a
Rollins? Yeah, it does. No, it's a good analogy. And it's like, when people are like, what does Rollins band sound like? I'm like, like the Rollins band. There's so many different, it's like when people say, what does Tool sound like? Like Tool?
Yeah.
You can't really say. I mean,
I always say, like, you know, MC5, Bad Brains, and Black Sabbath, and like it's just a lot of classic kind of stuff. It's hard to really put them in, in a box, but it's like, again, as far as mainstream stuff, I've missed them so many. Every time I miss this, we do one of these episodes. Motorhead did March or Die. I missed Motorhead in '98, Snake by Love, which I love that record so much. I recently was talking to Matt Sorg about that record. We were going back and forth about it. He was listening to it a little bit. I'm not going to skip out and talk about March or Die. It's a great Motorhead record. I don't really have much to really say about it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say about Motorhead records? They're good. There's good songs.
March or Die that's the Cat Scratch Fever cover.
That's right. It's great.
But that version of Hellraiser,
awesome,
is
better than Ozzy's.
Yes.
Well, it's Lemmy's song.
Exactly. So, but dude, there was a lot of great alternative albums that came out. Not to really get into it too much.
PJ Harvey Dry I had as my favorite for the alternative.
Dude,
record.
The Cure Wish was big for me. I still listen to this Ride album, Going Blank Again. I love it.
Are you a PJ Harvey fan?
I respect her, but I've never
jammed a whole lot.
Yes, so it's not
STP core. I mean,
yeah. No, look,
yeah.
It was weird back in the day. I liked Stone Temple Pilots, and then I kind of thought that they were like a ripoff, like a second tier. But then it was almost like when Scott Weiland died, I went back and started listening to all those.
Yeah.
And then I thought, you know what?
It's kind of their own thing.
This is actually like not a ripoff. I love Core. I love Purple. And I think that they're a unique band and they're crazy underrated.
In excess, yeah. 92.
But there's a lot
of...
the
Red Sun was also 92. I totally forgot about that. That's... Yeah.
Absolutely.
We haven't really talked about Vulgar Display a whole lot either. We kind of mowed over it a little bit, but it's a massive record for metal. And while all this alternative stuff's going on, Vulgar Display is a really big record. So there's really not much else to say about that.
No. I mean, I went, it was a week ago, out just a little west of Pittsburgh at Star Lake, and I went with BLO, then my cousin Jordan and my wife, and we went to the Pantera show, Lamb of God and Pantera. Not a Lamb of God fan, but...
You feel like Vulgar Display was really popular because of all the stuff that was going on? Do you feel like it was like a...
I just think that it was a different... Nothing sounded like it, other than the law.
Right.
Okay? I get it.
How many people have really heard Exhorter by that point? You know what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, I get it, that it sounds like the law, but Vulgar just reminds me of being with my friends John, Scott, and Jason, and just listening to Vulgar like religiously. And we're 13 years old, and my buddy Jason's older brother Jeff, we would always just go out, and we were just like, we were being idiots. We're young.
Yeah.
Drinking, smoking, all this stuff. Finding like, no, dude, this fucking weed looks like it's fucking pot, man. And we like brought it back to Jeff, and Jeff's like fucking drying it, and then we like rolled it, and we're like smoking some fucking random weed, and we're sitting there like 12 or 13, going, fuck, dude, man, it's like it's so stupid, but it brings back.
It's what Dom and I do during the week.
What's up?
It's what Dom and I do during the week. What's up?
You just find like crack pipes around.
Yeah,
whatever. But it was all that shit, dude. We were listening to Tool and Rollins, and Vulgar was massive, and Helmet, Marilyn Manson, The Portrait of American Family, stuff like even Biohazard, stuff like that. So all of that stuff to me was huge. And another album that was totally huge was Ministry.
I was going to shift to the industrial stuff, and I was going to say too, Ministry. It's funny that we talked about death metal, where it's like bands. Remember how we talked about bands that did their last kind of like before they shift. Ministry kind of does that with Psalm 69, which is not nearly my favorite Ministry record.
What's your favorite?
Land of Rape and Honey.
Okay, mine's Mind.
And you know what my second is? Honestly, With Sympathy.
No, that's fine.
I love With Sympathy. I think it's great. He's finally coming around and starting to do that again. Which my friend Mike McKay, who does a lot of great events here in Cleveland, he's a great dude. Does a lot of like events at No Class. We joked a year or two ago. We were like, so many kids, so many people are like into With Sympathy. When Class used to do gay new wave night, it would be all With Sympathy tracks. I got into With Sympathy from hanging out at I'm not even trying to be funny, like at gay clubs. Mm-hmm. When I would go to like hang out with my friend Paul, and we would hang out at like Bounce and stuff like that, they would play With Sympathy tracks. That's the first, I'd never heard it. Mm-hmm. And now it's like that's so popular again that there's a new generation of kids that love that record. Mm-hmm. That he's finally doing it again. It makes sense after years of him disavowing it.
Well, it literally sounds nothing like Ministry.
It doesn't, but years of him saying, "Oh, we didn't want to make the record. I hate it. It's not, and now all of a sudden he's coming around and doing it again. It's like, no, because, but Broken by Nine Inch Nails, also a big record, which again, I was never a big Nine Inch Nails fan up until my friend Matt Novak, who, shout out to him, great dude, has produced some stuff for me with Dark Worship and stuff. He's a huge Nine Inch Nails fan. And I recently, in the last few years, this is one of my favorite EPs ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. And we forgot to mention Pieces by Dismember as far as EPs. Death Metal, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Before we forget. But that Nine Inch Nails record's awesome. Pitch Shifter, Submit. Stop.
Yes.
Godflesh Pure is...
That's my favorite Godflesh.
My favorite Godflesh as well.
Yes.
And people are always like, oh, Street Cleaner, I love Street Cleaner. I love the first, self-titled EP, but Pure to me is the most. It's
sometimes it just takes like an album or two to really fucking just hit it like the nail on the head.
Pure is an industrial record.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's almost not them trying to be heavy or metallic. It's you can't fake liking Pure. It's you either, if you see like Godflesh, I'm like, all right, put on Pure. You either love it or you don't. Fear Factory does Soul of a New Machine, obviously.
Dude.
We all know what they would do. Frontline Assembly, Tactical Neural Implant, awesome record.
Mm-hmm.
Skinny Puppy, Last Rites, not my favorite Skinny Puppy record, but it's still pretty good.
I like 80s Skinny Puppy.
I like 80s Skinny Puppy better.
Some into the 90s. But yeah, by this time, I think that they were kind of taking a back seat to Nine Inch Nails and Ministry and stuff like that. And do you remember there was a whole kind of shit slinging going on between Ministry and White Zombie back then?
Yeah.
Because Al said that
with the look and the image, yeah.
Stole this fucking... I mean, come on.
He does kind of steal it.
When I was a kid, the first time I saw the video for New World Order and I saw Al walking with that cow, I was like, man, is this the guy from White Zombie?
Yeah.
But...
How do you feel about... Are you a Scorn fan?
Yeah, I have Ve Solis.
Ve Solis, great. And Soulstorm, another, Darkness Visible, great band. That's like kind of like the Godflesh kind of sound too. And God, the band God, the guys who were in Head of David with Justin.
Yeah.
Possession, that's a great industrial record. I got to
Submit, Pitch Shifter, what's the first one? Was it Industrial?
Industrial, yeah.
And then
Submit is the EP.
And
then afterwards they become Prodigy. So that's
the Desensitized is great.
Yeah.
That's heavy as fuck. Then after they become...
Prodigy.
Yeah. Which is not good. And I remember this Nine Inch Nails album. Back in the day, I think it's included on the album now, but back in the day it came with like a tiny fucking mini CD. That but this album is... I mean, it's just killer, man. I mean, Wish, Last... Happiness and Slavery, it's such a cool...
Wish is my favorite Nine Inch Nails song of all time.
It's so good.
Trent is so angry on that record. It's such an angry sounding, pissed off record. It's so great. They never really captured that.
I think...
Again.
Downward Spiral to me is one of the nastiest, filthiest, most depressing, angry... albums, and it's in my top for albums in the 90s. Okay, after that, I think that it's hard to be like that when you're a multimillionaire.
Right.
And that's the one thing that in an interview with Dee Snider, completely unrelated, but Dee Snider was like, after we wrote We're Not Gonna Take It, and we were worth fucking so much money, and it was like at the top, he was like, I'm sitting at my mansion, in my pool, just floating, laying out in the sun in my pool. I got my fucking like Corvettes and my Ferraris. And I'm thinking, okay, what's the next fucking angsty fucking like teen anthem that I can write?
Right.
And then he just stopped and he looked around and he just said, I'm not pissed anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of how I feel about Trent Reznor, is that he kept putting albums out, you know what I mean? And Nine Inch Nails, to me, just didn't have that same feel. It doesn't have... When I think of Nine Inch Nails, I think of shit that's like fucking heroin soaked.
Yeah.
I think of like industrial, dirty.
I think of being like the Chamber in like the 90s with
Cleveland, just that fucking like steel factory. Like, I don't think of Trent Reznor
in a fur coat,
winning Oscars. That's the last thing, and that's the one thing that I will always respect. That's other things as well, but with Al Jorgensen from Ministry, never been like that.
No, he never has been Hollywood. He's also never really had the success that Trent's had in the same level.
And there's classic stories that he's told over, like the one is he's the biggest Rolling Stones fan, loves the Stones. And then I think it was right around Mind, or it was around that era, that he just fucking shot up and he passed out. And then he woke up. And the guy that he was, I don't know if it was a Paul Barker or the other, I don't know if it was him, somebody else, said, you totally missed it. And he was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, Keith Richards came over and scored some fucking dope. And you were like, we tried waking you up, but you were just fucking out. And he was like, wait, what?
No.
And they were like, Keith Richards was here hanging out, and he was here to get some fucking dope, and you were just like laying there fucking just like out. And he was like, so I know, like, they're like my favorite band, and there was something to that. So that's like, even Marilyn Manson, which people can make fun of, the dude's a slime ball.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And that's what I still respect about it. And it's like, Nine Inch Nails to me, like, when I think of Trent Reznor, I think of fucking Caviar now.
Yeah, he doesn't really have that image of being like a really like a voracious kind of person.
Yeah, it looks like, your clothes are held on by fucking black electrical tape.
Yeah.
That's back in the day, you know what I mean?
Which is funny when we get to like, the only last mainstream record I really want to talk about before we get into something that's very not mainstream is Blind Lemon self-titled record. One of my favorite records from '92. I think it's great. Shannon Moon, one of the best voices of the '90s. I think he's very underrated.
I like this.
I love Blind Lemon a lot. I think it's one of the. I think that record's held up a lot better than a lot of other records from the '90s.
He's on
Shannon Moon. I mean, he's fantastic. I mean,
he's on Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, grew up with Axl and from Indiana. Got to shout out my friend Anna, who's a big Blind Lemon fan. So.
I love that album. It was goofy to me when I first heard it, just because the video with the little girl and
Change is one of the best songs ever of the '90s.
But
it's beautiful.
I will absolutely agree. I think it's a great album, and I think honestly, if people listen to
his voice is beautiful. Is one of the best voices.
It is, and I'll mention really quick. At the end, I'll give my top 10. Okay, but. The Black Crowes, the Southern Harmony and Musical Companion.
God.
If you like that, you'd like Blind Melon.
Yeah.
It's just, it's kind of in the same vein. So that's why I'm surprised that you like it. I dig it. I think the album's great. I think Screaming Trees.
Yeah.
Sweet Oblivion, rest in peace. Mark Lanigan just recently passed away.
Yeah.
In fact, I think one of the other guys... Oh my God! Is it Van or Gary Lee? One of them just recently passed away. It was Van. But that album to me is just incredible, and I would recommend. If
Pavement too. I mean, Pavement was a pretty big alternative rock band.
And if people like the Seattle stuff. I recommend getting a book called Everybody Loves Our Town, and it's like an oral history of Seattle. Mm-hmm. And they even talked to Duff McKagan, who people think, he's Guns N' Roses, he's Sunset Strip. No, that motherfucker was Seattle and punk.
Yeah.
He's a dirtbag that came from Seattle. Like and so that kind of stuff is, like, if you're into that kind of stuff, I would definitely check out that book.
And getting, and it's funny, as far as as I guess to round off our '92 retrospective, you can't go from the mainstream to the not mainstream more than you can with black metal, which is really coming into its own in '92. Mm-hmm. This is a great way to end it, because A Blaze in the Northern Sky, Burzum self-titled, Wrath of the Tyrant demo. I mean, let's just go fucking through it. Diabolical Full Moon Mysticism by Immortal.
Impaled Nazarene.
Impaled Nazarene. Total Crump Nors, which everybody apparently loves and thinks is the best black metal album of 92. I think that's crazy. But Dark Endless by Marduk. Satanic Blood, Von. Mortuary Drape, Into the Drape. Mystifier, Wicca, Sabbath, Evoke.
Dude, that's first of all, Sabbath is one of my, dude, this is such a cool band.
Blood Ritual by Samuel. I mean, come on, man. This is like
Evoke is such a cool album. Sabbath's such a Sabbath.
Yurgatsil by Enslaved. I'm probably butchering that name. Crush, Kill, Destroy by Sergato.
I think you say it like Yggdrasil or something. Which I love. Enslaved.
Requiem for Fools by Psy. Japan.
I fucking hate Psy.
Really?
Fucking hate Psy, dude. I like fucking.
Really?
I listen to that stuff. People are like, they'll come out with a new album. Everybody fucking just creams their pants over it, and I'm like, I'll put it on and I'll listen to it, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude. It's like Voivod. They're like the Jap Voivod to me. I don't get it. People go nuts. I know, and it's like I listen to it and I think, this is fucking embarrassing. Like, I don't even understand what's going on here, but
Darkified Sleep Forever. They're kind of a death metal band, but I put them kind of in this black metal.
A lot of this stuff is like really, especially if we're talking about
that Burzum self-titled though is
wave.
Burzum and Darkthrone. Burzum's self-titled and then Blaze in the Northern Sky. I've listened to 20 times each doing this, and I will say this: that Burzum, you don't have to like what he says or what he believes. That's a fucking amazing record. It's unmatched as far as atmosphere goes. And along with the Blaze in the Northern Sky, if you put it in the context of this year with heavy music and what was going on in music in general, these dudes were doing something completely... It's almost hard to think about it now. Because it's so done. It's so overdone. But it's like, this is so stripped down. This is the rawest shit ever.
Oh, dude, that Burzum album literally kills.
It's fucking... Yeah, I'll take a stab at that Burzum album and say that it's pretty wild.
A Blaze in the Northern Sky. I wonder if they're talking about churches that are,
Right.
I mean, those guys weren't involved in that shit. And
it's still really, I don't know, Fenris always says it's not a pure black metal record, but it's still pretty fucking raw.
Here's the thing. To me, I think that you had the first wave of black metal with, Bathory, Venom, Merciful Fate, shit like that. Stuff that was considered black metal back then. You know what I mean? This to me was the second wave. Yeah. Because by this time, Bathory wasn't putting out this kind of shit.
You have stuff like Mystifier, Wicca. I put Sabbath, Evoke.
It's great.
Mortuary Drape, Into the Drape. There's still stuff that's Sex Trash, just Funeral Serenade. There's still bands that kind of have that 80s sound still going. But you're right, though. By the 90s, they were kind of bringing that 80s thing into the 90s.
The Brazilian shit, especially like Mystifier and Sex Trash and stuff, they still had that kind of like sarcophago
thrashy
feel
kind of
to
thing,
it. But yeah, this is like the second wave to me because what sounded like Diabolical Full Moon Mysticism or the self-titled Burzum prior to this?
A vacuum cleaner being thrown on the steps.
I'll say this. Maybe I've always thought I listen to Venom and I can certainly get the influence, but I really get it when I listen to those first several Bathory albums, especially like The Return.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That to me is where a lot of these bands,
even though they say they weren't listening, they weren't influenced by Venom
and stuff like that. Right. And I just think that this to me that scene was in its infancy. These are the first albums that... Not Darkthrone, because Darkthrone was a fucking death metal band.
I hate to be this guy, too, and I'm usually not like this. You know me with records, but this Wrath of the Tyrant release is the only Emperor stuff I really love.
I don't think...
I love their demo stuff and Wrath of the Tyrant. I don't like In the Nightside Eclipse as much as other people do. I think that...
I'm going to be honest with you. They are not even on my list of black metal bands that I like.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're...
I'll take Dark Endless over Wrath.
Nightside and Anthems, I listen to it and I'm like, whatever. I agree with you though. I take that Marduk album over this. I take Darkthrone, that Impaled Nazarene album over that. But to me,
the Black Blood. I think the Black is. I love John from Dissection. But it's, this is different than Dissection. It's more stripped down, more straightforward black metal. I think it's great too. But definitely a different. Obviously black metal would kind of come into the mid to late '90s and kind of, I think, dominate death metal. And I think the reason why is like if you look at black metal in this context of the '90s, what they were doing. These death metal bands, especially, we talked about earlier with death metal to round it out and kind of get it all full circle. We talked about a lot of death metal bands that were kind of starting to like kind of shift to a different sound. Black metal is kind of like coming into its own this time, and they're kind of like they're going to be they're fisting Christ. It's like they're getting in there, and it's going to be a different thing going. And you can kind of see how that happens, But
to me, it's death metal. Like this is the peak. That old school shit, because like we said before, after that
it's almost like black metal.
They start doing different, and then here comes black metal. That obviously that whole thing is storied with the church burnings and the murders and everything behind that. And then it was really the Seattle scene kind of coming up with the popular stuff, and at the same time a lot of heavier stuff, with like Pantera and whatnot. But the hard rock craze from the 80s was really it.
Done.
And it literally drops off after that. And it was crazy because it was, if you read books by any of these guys, you read or you watch interviews, you listen to stuff, literally it was like on a Friday, they were on a label, they were loved by the label, everything was great. And then a Monday, it was a phone call. Yeah, you guys are gone. We're going to go with somebody else. And it was
I also think that, by the time in the late 90s, I think death metal bands, like, the black metal thing had kind of become more trendy too, where it was like, everybody's kind of more into that now. And we'll get into kind of 97 next. We're going to do 97 next, where I think it's going to be different, because there's no hard rock by that time. It's just Third Eye Blind records, and it's like...
I do have to mention, because I don't think we mentioned it at all, because it's in my... list. So this is my top 10 of 1992. In no order.
Go ahead.
Danzig 3, How the Gods Kill, Helmet Meantime, Testament the Ritual.
We didn't talk about the Ritual a lot, but that's a great record.
Pantera Vulgar, Solitude Eternus, Beyond the Crimson Horizon.
I was waiting for you. I knew you'd bring it
with
up.
Seeds of Desolate that's an absolute fucking perfect. Biello never heard that band, and on the way back from Pantera, I played that song for him. And I was kind of like looking at him. He was over there going, he was just like,
it's good.
And I'm just like, yeah. Alice in Chains, Dirt.
Beastie Boys, Check Your Head. I'm kidding.
Biohazard, Urban Discipline, The Black Crowes, Southern Harmony and Musical Companion, Internal Void, Standing on the Sun. Solitude and Internal Void, I did not listen to back then. Okay, so those two albums came later. That when I listen to them now, they're definitely top 10 of 92. Wasp, The Crimson Idol. Albums that were in heavy rotation for me with my friends: White Zombie, Lost Exorcisto, Ministry, Psalm 69, Angel Death, Faith No More, Countdown to Extinction, 9 Inch Nails, Broken. And I'm going to do you a solid.
Gorbion Necropsy demo?
No, I'm going to say that we did listen to rap.
Nice. There you go. 92 is a great year for rap. I will say that.
Das FX.
There you go.
Okay.
It's fantastic. And also the Chronic, 92. There's a lot of good stuff in 92.
So I will, even though this is like, to me, this is like bringing up outlaw country, where it just wouldn't fit,
I was really hoping you were going to say the Gorbion Necropsy demo, which is also great from 92, but it's not as good as a lot of rap records. But it's like, also, in a weird way, it's too, like, rap is kind of becoming, it's worth mentioning, because by the time we get to 97, you can see that rap has kind of had an influence on music in the last 5 years.
I wish somebody would do, maybe like not us, but I don't know if anybody that's, in that scene or that culture would do a podcast on like what we do, where it's like mainstream stuff was really good and then it just turned to shit.
Yeah.
Because clearly the same thing happened with that stuff. And I think that was a great era for a lot of music. That included, So
I think by the time, I think rap's influence on rock music is definitely noticeable by the end of the late 90s. You can see because, I mean, in the early 90s, you have a lot of big rap records. Again, like I said in the beginning of the episode, it's like, this is such a huge year for the music industry in general that it's like, that includes all genres.
Well, dude, some of those albums that I was just, to kind of go back, I never owned any of these albums. I had friends that did. I never owned them. So I went back and I listened to Gangstar and I listened to The Far Side.
Oh, yeah.
And that Redman album, which I was like, holy shit, dude, I remember this. I remember listening to that. And there's something to me that was just different, as with a lot of the mainstream stuff like Alice in Chains. There was more thought put into it. There was more talent.
Ice Cube.
Yes. What was that? Lethal Injection was 92, which I don't give a fuck. I love
Predator.
Ice Cube. Was it the Predator?
Predator was 92.
Was it? Okay. Lethal Injection was after.
Lethal Injection was 93.
Okay.
But it's like, I remember, it's funny, like, before we wrap up, and I was really...
What was on the Predator? Was it Today Was a Good Day?
Today Was a Good Day. My parents were way more upset about me having a Predator poster than they were about me having Cannibal Corpse in my house. So it's like, that's kind of like, that's like, definitely there's something about,
No way, Italian.
I mean, it's like, Predator almost got me kicked out of my house. I mean, I think but...
That, dude, it was kind of the same with me because I had like a buddy that I went to school with. His name was Phil, and he taped. We weren't like good friends at all, but he taped for me like dubbed fucking Too Short, NWA, all this other shit.
Oh yeah.
I didn't really listen to it a lot. You know what I mean? So all of my other shit was just metal. It was the stuff I mentioned. Even back then I was like listening to COC and all this stuff. And then my parents found the dubs. And my dad was like, what the hell is this? And I'm just like,
all right.
Okay, so you don't care about any of this other shit.
You don't care about Toomey the Mutilated, but you care about, when you can actually hear a dude saying he's going to kill cops and fucking, that's kind of different.
Body count. Forgot to mention that, body count.
Body count, right?
Solitude, or not Solitude, oh my God, Suicidal Tendencies at Art of Rebellion.
Yeah.
Not one of my favorites, but that being said,
wrap it up.
I can't believe we did this in about an hour and 32. That's kind of crazy. I thought it was going to be, so I think we ran through it. If there's probably shit we forgot.
I don't really think there is. I think we kind of got through it all. Let's see.
I think we were like, so 6-hour episode, an hour and a half, but it's great year.
97 next. That'll be about 15 minutes.
That'll be a 15-minute episode. And we still have to do 90, right?
We have to do 90, and that'll be about a week and a half. So yeah.
But no, it's awesome. I appreciate everybody listening, and
right.
Stay tuned for more.
Cheers.
Cheers.